I didn't drop the pastries when I heard my mother say I was dumb. I did not storm the room or beg for mercy. I stood in the doorway of my own country house, with boxes trembling in my arms, and listened to the people I had fed, hosted, and financed raise their glasses to stupid relatives with money. Every laugh felt like a fork pressed to a nerve. If a life can tilt in a single breath, mine tilted then, sliding from naive belonging to the cold clarity of being used. I drove away without a sound, and somewhere between the hedgerows and the city lights, grief hardened into a blade I could finally hold. My name is Hannah. I am 34, and on paper, my life looks tidy. I live in a modest city apartment, work as a senior account manager for a trading firm, and keep most evenings busy enough that memory can't corner me. 3 years earlier, I divorced Daniel with no courtroom theatrics, only the kind of silence that follows along. Mutual shrug, no children, no custody battles, just a house to divide. The country place with 3 bedrooms, a patch of land, and enough stale weekends to make nostalgia taste like chalk. I wanted to sell it, take the cash, and finally buy a modern apartment outright. When I floated that idea over Sunday dinner, forks paused and faces arranged themselves into theatrical heartbreak. My mother begged me to think of the family holidays. My father frowned like tradition itself sat on his plate. My sister Lily's eyes filled on command as she imagined barbecues, birthdays, summer nights. I had watched those eyes since childhood. I knew their script, and still, I folded. I kept the house and took a mortgage for my city place instead of paying in full. I handed my mother a spare key. She accepted it like a crown jewel. Soon the house became everyone's retreat except mine. My parents slipped away on weekends and returned the place with half-empty bottles and muddy prints, promising they had left it just as they found it. Lily and her boyfriend Jason cultivated romance across my deck with flower petals and forgotten clothing, staging posts that collected admiration while I paid the utility bills. Holidays where thickest aunts commandeered the kitchen and me along with it. Uncles colonized the television. My parents greeted guests like deed holders. Even Jason's parents arrived warmly strangers, with plates and gratitude that tasted faintly of pity. I told myself this was family, that sacrifice and compromise were a kind of love. I framed my exhaustion as generosity and my dwindling savings as goodwill. At night in my quiet apartment, I asked a question I tried not to understand if I stopped giving. Would they still want me? The answer came on a Friday I wasn't meant to be free. A late meeting got canceled, and I decided to surprise them at the house with pastries, chocolate croissants, fruit tarts, lemon bars boxed in neat rows like proof of my affection. Cars crowded the drive. Lights warmed the windows. The laughter reached me before the doorknob cooled in my hand. "Hannah is just so incredibly dumb," my mother said, with the satisfied precision of someone trimming a hedge. Laughter swelled. "She does whatever we tell her, remember convincing her not to sell. She took a mortgage instead, and we use the place whenever we want," my father chimed in as if he were recounting an investment win. Lily bragged about rent money I'd wired whenever she cried on cue. Aunt Nancy gloated about emergency dental work that furnished her living room. Uncle Paul confessed that my car repair loan had floated a fishing boat. When Jason's father called me a personal bank that never asked for proof, someone raised a glass to stupid relatives with money, and the room clinked its agreement while I stood at the threshold like an unpaid ghost. I left without closing the door too loudly. On the drive back, I cried until tears felt mechanical, then stopped as if a valve had shut. The next morning, I began to write. I listed every transfer, every small favor, every bill I had covered because guilt had a better memory than I did. 3 notebook pages filled with dates and amounts. A quiet ledger of exploitation. I took calls when they came and pretended nothing was wrong. My mother told me about book club. I asked after my father's knee. I congratulated Lily on a sales goal. Each sweet syllable tasted like poison. but I said them anyway because I wanted them unguarded. People who think you are still asleep speak freely. I would wait until they asked for something big, something they believed they were entitled to, and then I would cut the string they had tied around my throat. I did not wait long. 2 weeks later, my mother called, her voice lit with triumph. Lily was engaged. The perfect place for the celebration, the country house. Naturally, I agreed with warmth I did not feel. Then came the practiced wince. Funds were short, and a proper party would need catering, flowers, lights, maybe even a small band. 5,000, she said, letting the words land like a dare, as if I would leap to catch them. I murmured sympathy and explained I had just had unexpected expenses, that my emergency fund was tapped. She pivoted neatly to the trap, proposing that the family pay up front and I could reimburse them once able. I said it sounded fair, told her to book whatever she liked. She called me an angel. I hung up and watched my reflection in the window settle into something I recognized calm, deliberate, finished with begging. I had been their puppet for years. Now I would study where the strings were knotted and cut them clean. The week before Lily's engagement party, I called a locksmith named Frank and asked him to meet me at the country house on Friday evening. His truck rolled into the drive just as the sunset poured gold through the hedges. Insane. The place was dressed for celebration, white streamers across the porch, balloons tugging in the wind, tables draped in linens. It was beautiful, almost enough to bend me back into guilt. Almost. By the time Frank left, every lock had been changed front, back. Sliding patio and the new keys sat cool and solid in my purse. I walked slowly through each room, stripping streamers, balloons, ribbons, bagging them until my arms burned. By the end, the house was bare and the garbage bags leaned against the siding like gravestones. On the drive back, I typed a quick text to my mother, not feeling well. Better skip the party, don't want to spread anything. Her reply was brisk. Feel better, no offer of soup, no hint of concern. I set my phone aside and smiled. Tomorrow, the real party would begin. Saturday afternoon, while I ate pizza in my apartment, my phone buzzed with frantic messages. First a text, "Our keys don't work. Did you change something?" Then calls, one after another, escalating in urgency. Finally, I picked up. My mother's voice was sharp with panic. "We're locked out. Hannah, the guests are arriving. The caterer is outside." I sipped coffee. "Weird," I said. "Nothing's wrong with the locks. I just had them changed yesterday." Silence stretched until it trembled. You changed the locks," she stammered. "Why?" My tone stayed calm. "To protect my property, especially after hearing what you all really think of me." She tried to bluff confusion, but I cut her off, reciting their own words back like scripture: the rent scams, the fake dental work, the fishing boat, the toast to stupid relatives with money. Panic bled through the line. Voices murmured in the background, some denying, some shushing. Finally, Lily's voice barreled through, furious and shrill. "You're ruining everything, Hannah. We spent thousands. Jason's parents are here. The food is here. You're making us look like fools." I almost laughed. I thought you already decided I was the fool. Her fury curdled into pleading, but I explained with brutal clarity the decorations were in garbage bags by the side of the house. And if anyone touched my new locks, the police would arrive. Security cameras blinked quietly on my phone screen. Proof I was not bluffing. Lily broke into sobs. My mother's voice shrank to begging. "Please, sweetheart, we can work this out." I told her the truth they had never earned. Helping is not exploiting. Helping is not laughing behind someone's back while draining her savings. Then I hung up. For the next hour, I watched through the app as they scrambled trays shoved back into vans, decorations torn down in fury, Lily's mascara streaking her cheeks. Jason looked stunned, his parents mortified. My parents hovered like storm clouds that had lost their rain. It was the sweetest theater I had ever seen. The next morning, Pounding rattled my apartment door. My parents and Lily stormed in, faces hard, voices louder than sense. "You ruined everything," Lily screamed. "My engagement party." "All because of you," I crossed my arms. "No. Lily, you ruined it by mocking me and assuming I would bankroll it anyway." She shrieked about the $5,000, about promises I had never made. I reminded her of my exact words they chose to spend money they didn't have. Gambling I would fold. That gamble had failed. My mother tried her old trick, softening her voice, insisting we're family. I laughed in her face. Family doesn't scam its own. Family doesn't toast to stupidity. My father slammed his fist on my counter, demanding I pay them back and apologize. "Perfect," I said lightly. "That saves me the trouble of cutting you off myself." For the first time in my adult life, I watched my words sink into them with more weight than their guilt had ever placed on me. They left, storming down the hall, and I closed the door with a laugh that felt like chains breaking. In the weeks that followed, silence became my shield. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored. I turned the country house into a short-term rental, the income covering most of my city mortgage. Strangers treated the place with more respect than my family ever had, and their cheerful reviews filled the spaces my relatives once occupied with contempt. Lily married in a small church ceremony, uninvited and unfunded by me. My parents tried to reach through mutual friends, but every attempt hit the same wall. I chose dinners with friends, weekends of my own design, evenings with books and peace. Sometimes I thought of that night in the doorway, pastries trembling in my hands as laughter sliced me open. Back then, I thought I was breaking, but it was only waking. 6 months passed before the storm tried to circle back. I had built a new rhythm, one that no longer spun around guilt. The country house became a source of income instead of an endless drain, its guestbook filling with grateful notes from travelers who respected the space far more than my own kin ever had. My apartment grew warmer too, not from decor or renovations, but from the absence of dread, for the first time in years. I could sit in silence without expecting the phone to vibrate with another emergency that always seemed to end with my wallet. It was freedom, steady and intoxicating. Then, late one evening, an email from my mother appeared in my inbox. The subject line was simple: "Please talk to us." I stared at it for a long time, not opening it. The old Hannah would have clicked immediately, searching for reconciliation like a starving animal. But now I knew better. Their voices had already told me who they were the night they clinked glasses to my stupidity. I deleted it unread. A few days later, a message came through a mutual friend, urging me to at least hear them out. I thanked the friend politely and refused. My parents had spoken loudly enough. No translation was needed. Still, memory is a persistent ghost. Sometimes, walking home after work, I would catch myself recalling small details from the betrayal. The way my father's voice had lifted with pride as he bragged about tricking me into keeping the house. The smug tilt of Lily's tone as she admitted she could wring money out of me with a well-timed sob. My mother's triumphant toast, her glass raised high over a room of conspirators. Those fragments no longer shattered me the way they had at first, but they hardened something inside me. Each recollection was a reminder not to falter, not to let sentiment drag me back into the role they had written for me. Freedom revealed itself in small moments. The first time I walked past a boutique window and bought myself a dress without calculating what emergency might drain me next. The Saturday I stayed in bed until noon, knowing no one would barge in demanding a ride. A favor. Alone. The quiet pride of watching the rental income deposit into my account and realizing it was building me, not bleeding me. My life had not become extraordinary overnight, but it was mine uncontested, unmanipulated, unmocked. Of course, family gatherings went on without me. Photographs surfaced on social media, Lily smiling with Jason, my parents hovering behind her like stage directors, aunts and uncles clustered in familiar groups. The comments glowed with admiration for their closeness. I scrolled past with a strange mix of sorrow and relief. They still had each other, still had their stage. Only now, they no longer had me financing the props. What once would have stung now felt like distance well-earned. The irony was not lost on me. They had tried to keep me bound to them by exploiting my loyalty, but in the end, their greed had cut the rope. They thought they were making me into a fool when they mocked me in that house, yet it was the moment they handed me the sharpest truth of my life. I could see it now. All those years of sacrifice had not bought me love, only convenience. All those yeses had not built bonds, only habits of exploitation. What they mistook for stupidity was something more dangerous to them: patience. Patience to wait, to plan, and to finally choose myself. Some nights, I still replay that drive from the house, pastries untouched on the seat beside me, tears blurring the road. Back then, I thought I was leaving with nothing but humiliation. But what I really carried away was clarity. Clarity that love without respect is only performance, and loyalty without reciprocity is only servitude. They believed they could keep me forever in that role. But they forgot one simple truth: puppets don't cut their own strings. People do, and I did. Life after cutting ties did not become a fairy tale, but it did become honest. I still woke some mornings with a pang of loneliness, still wondered if birthdays or holidays would always echo with absence. Yet that emptiness was cleaner than the crowded rooms of false laughter I had endured before. There is a difference between solitude and being surrounded by people who treat you like a resource. I had finally learned it. The house, once a monument to guilt, turned into a steady lifeline. Guests arrived with children, with pets, with anniversaries to celebrate. They left thank you notes and little gifts: a bottle of wine, a hand-drawn card from a child. Each message reminded me that respect is not complicated. It is simply treating what belongs to another as if it matters, something my own blood had never managed to do. Word filtered through mutual acquaintances that Lily still spoke of me bitterly, calling me selfish, painting herself as the victim of my coldness. Jason, apparently, avoided the subject. My parents alternated between attempts to excuse their behavior as jokes and pleas for reconciliation that carried no acknowledgement of the harm they had done. Without admission, without responsibility, their words were empty. I let them drift into silence, unanswered. The world did not collapse without them in it. Instead, it opened. I traveled on weekends, places I had once postponed because family always came first. I sat in cafes with friends who never expected me to foot every bill. I rediscovered the strange sweetness of spending money on myself without guilt. Bit by bit, I rebuilt a life not defined by their approval. Sometimes, late at night, I would recall that pivotal toast, "Here's to stupid relatives with money," and I realized it had been a blessing disguised as cruelty. It had been the slap that woke me, the fire that burned through years of illusion. They thought they had humiliated me. In truth, they had freed me. I stopped asking if they loved me or only loved what I gave. Their laughter had already answered that question. My task now was not to change them, but to protect myself. In choosing boundaries, I chose survival, and survival, I discovered, is a kind of triumph. 6 months became a year. The house thrived as a rental. My apartment grew into a home filled with things I had chosen, not hand-me-downs from a manipulative past. I still saw their names occasionally, an email here, a tag on social media there, but I no longer felt the reflex to respond. Some called it harsh. I called it peace. Because love that demands your silence, your sacrifice, your depletion, is not love. It is hunger, and hunger will devour you until you starve. I had fed it for years. I would not again. If there is a lesson in my story, it is this: Family is not defined by blood, but by behavior. Anyone can claim the title of parent, sibling, or relative. Few can earn the role of ally, of safe harbor, of true kin. Do not confuse obligation with love. Do not confuse exploitation with sacrifice. And above all, do not let laughter at your expense convince you that you are worthless. Sometimes the cruelest words are the ones that finally set you free. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue bringing powerful stories to life. And I would love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below about the moment you realized your own worth.